A continuación, les invitamos a escuchar la primera conferencia magistral, How Life Skills and Cultural Contexts Consolidate English Learning, a cargo del doctor Mario Herrera, pero antes me permitiré presentarlo con todas y todos ustedes. Mario Herrera is one of the world's best-known ELT authors for young learners. He has a BA in education and an MA in teaching English as a foreign language. He specializes in teaching English to young learners. He has authored and co-authored several best-selling ELT programs worldwide, including Balloons, Pockets, and Big Fun for Preschool, Parade, Backpack, and Big English, and Big English Plus for primary schools, Big Teens and Sunbirds for secondary schools. Mr. Herrera has been involved in teacher training for more than 30 years and travels around the world on behalf of Pearson, directing seminars and workshops, which are highly regarded and well known for their level of participants' involvement. He is a recipient of several academic awards. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Mario Herrera. Welcome. You can start your presentation.
Hello, thank you, everybody. I'm going to try to share my screen, and I think I'm there. Let me see if we're good with that. Yes, here we are. First of all, I want to thank you for attending this session. I know that when we work online, the dynamics are different, and of course, I would have preferred to have visited Colima, as I have many, many times before. But given the circumstances and the date, I'm currently traveling through Mexico by this coincidentally, but I am now in Monterrey, so I was not able to work this day in Colima, and we agreed to work this way, and I'm very happy to be with you. Congratulations on your anniversary, and I do look forward to another one of those wonderful events that you have had in Manzanillo or in the city of Colima, and to be able to be back and meet in the flesh. What we're going to talk about today for an hour is one of the, let's put it this way, the dearest concepts of education or methodology for language teaching to me. And that has to do with the fact that of my concerns about not taking into its full value what we consider being life skills, and of course the cultural context of where our students live, in order to help those things or factor in those things into the language learning experience. There are so many things we can say about this, but I will try to be succinct and share with you in an hour the highlights of this. What we want, the desire that what we have as part of the process that we direct is, of course, we want foreign students that have personal awareness and of their performance abilities, and we want them to be using correct English. The concept of correct English is very important because there is a difference between speaking a language and speaking it properly. And although there are people that believe this has to do with grammar or correct structures. What I mean, not only that, but I also mean lifelong experiences. In other words, the possibility of being yourself when you use English. And for that, your personal life, the way you work and the way you live is crucial. Bringing those things into the teaching process. There are English learning dimensions. And what we want, of course, is to go into living goals. And those have to do with communication in terms of the situation that we live every day. How does the Universidad de Colima want its graduates, and of course, those that later study with your students, or you as professors, how do you want them to perform in everyday life? And you want them to be able to communicate. That's the purpose. We want a language has a communication purpose. And of course, if we round that up, that would be why say it. Every time we speak, we have a reason. Otherwise, we would be speaking all the time or never speaking. So when does a human being talk? When he or she has something to say. a reason for speaking, for communicating. But you see, I'm moving it to the left because that's not the way we teach. That is our goal. But of course, in order to attend that, in order to achieve that, we have linguistic competence to achieve in our students. And that would be the communication, as I said earlier, and that's the reason why I said it earlier, using English correctly. And that could be labeled as how to say it. So now we have why speak, why say something, but how to say that something. And of course, these were our targets at the end of the 20th century. And because those of you that are students are now probably in the ages between 19 and 22, you were probably born around the year 2000. So what I'm trying to say is that before you were born, or at the time you were being born, these were our concerns. We already knew that we wanted our students to communicate properly. And in order to do that, they needed to know how to say it, but in a correct situation. So then what is the problem? What has our target been ever since you were born, if you're a student? Okay. Well, we wanted to, the first thing we did was to incorporate the infamous now 21st century skills. But now what? What is this 2020, 2021, these post-pandemic years, what are they supposed to bring us, okay? How do we assure a solid link between the two, the linguistic competence and the performance in community, the performance in a communication situation, give the correct space to why say it. And of course, through those of you that know me from before know that I do experimentation with students. And although the pandemic has not been a blessing, okay, and boy, do we know that, for research, in a way it has, because all this use of technology, those of us that do experimentation, I was able, for instance, to experiment with students online, which is something I had never done. But we accelerated that because that was our only means of communicating. So now we have a clearer picture of how this hybrid way of teaching, and speaking of hybrid, well, the way you are celebrating your conference in a hybrid way. Now, but it has brought some issues. So how do we add a gap-filling dimension? The red area in this transparency needs to be filled in with this filling gap thing, which I have called personalization and customizing competences. And what we're trying to do here is allow communication to grow, to reach into very personal things, realistic things, awareness situations, where, of course, we can fulfill another of the labels, which is what to say. How does a human being come to the decision of what to say? If I ask anybody something, these different people are going to come up with different things. Each one of them reached a mental decision of what to say. And this is one of the gaps that we have in current communication. We try to go from how to say it and to match the why, but there is a gap on what to say. Many times we don't prepare our students. We don't stop at knowing what they want to say, knowing how to say it. So then the why to say, the what to say, and the how to say it should be part of our process, not just the first two that I talked about. So if we add those together, we have, of course, a very holistic, integral dimension of learning, which will allow us to have students learn English in a meaningful way. If you notice, the word meaningful popped up to your left. Meaningful in terms of having a purpose, okay, which matches the why to say. Representative, because it is the student who must manifest. It's not supposed to just be what I learned or the way I was taught, and then I'm going to behave in society and community. I'm going to perform. No. It has to be representative of what, and there's the what, of what I have to say. And then, of course, correct. So these are our three keywords today: communication in a meaningful way in society and community, in a very representative way of who our students are. And then, of course, through our academics, done in the correct way. Now, if we keep these, how is learning supposed to happen this way? Well, there are different perspectives. Some people believe, and I know that in different events of Universidad de Colima, I've seen people talk about this, the famous benchmark perspective, when there is a purpose. All these people taking examinations and TOEFLs and the other categories of, because you're going to study a master's degree somewhere, blah, 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 blah. All those benchmarks are one way of looking at it. There is a benchmark perspective, but then the problem with that is that we need to prepare our students through certain dimensions. For instance, certain dimensions that need to be shown through outcomes. So for instance, one of the things we want to achieve in this intermediate stage of personalization is there have to be activities for personalization. And what's going to show from the learner is what they want. There has to be a momentum of customizing because we only have a certain amount of times. Fortunately, we don't live with our students. And when you become teachers, those of you that are students, you're not going to have your students for, probably 5 hours a week. So you need to customize your teaching process. And the result of that is that what they can have of what they want. Notice how it's trickling down. What they want, well, what can they have of what they want? Okay, in terms of the ability to speak. Then we have to accommodate, and that takes us to a narrower path. And in other words, how can we have them work in a process that what they can have, there is a way for them to make it theirs? Because the only way a language is correctly appropriated is by being part of us. That's the reason why there is such a difference between people's native language and a foreign language. And that's why your school is called Lenguas Extranjeras, okay? Because it is very difficult to master a second language at the same level of your first language, because it is not just the language. It is all the personal things that are attached to it. So even if people speak both languages correctly, there is always going to be a go-to thought. And the idea is to bring thoughts into the knowledge, the possibilities of using the language for thoughts. So then there is a very important principle of accommodation. And then to the cherry on top of the icing for personalization is when we can develop activities for culturalizing. And I'm going to show you some activities if time permits. And that is not only making it yours, but being yourself with the language. Because one thing is if you can become sensitive enough to be yourself in English, but the other thing is, first of all, you had to make English yours, or those expressions, those possibilities of expression. So then these trickle down in a way of how, when authors like myself are now designing methodology, we have to consider these different levels as we go down. Now, so here we are again. How is this supposed to happen? Well, what's happening is that the current status, and notice that I eliminated my proposal because I want to present the current situation, is that basically it's working the other way around. Although because of benchmarks, living goals or living skills and goals are supposed to be the target, the way we teach is the opposite way. That's why my arrows turned. Okay, you are being taught, and you will teach linguistic competence in an effort to achieve living skills. Okay? And that's where we get into the personalization. So now it looks like Batman, okay? Because it matches both. So let me turn, in order to update it, there we go. This is what's supposed to be happening in a very updated methodology. It's supposed to have, it's supposed to be fluid, and it's supposed to give feedback up and forth, but we are supposed to center on personalization and customizing competences. So to take that into action, then I would like, notice that the central category, I'm giving it a more relevant presence. And I want you to notice, because I just wanted to show you this so that I can move it up a bit, so I can start doing the exemplification of it. So let's move it up a bit. And now we can start talking about different categories. Some of the I'm going to parade, for the time that we have, I'm going to parade a series of interventions that we can have to fill in this ELT gap that we have in the methodology that we inherited from the 20th century. And of course, focus on this personalization and customizing competences. So first, I want you to see assessment. We have been talking about assessment for a long time now. Yeah, from the 90s, we started talking about assessment, the mid-90s, like 94, 95. Now, if you see, notice the arrow, the arch here. It goes all, it's huge, because we do assessment in linguistic competence, and then because of the purpose of our of our teaching, the reason why people study English, we assess them over at living, and that is a huge gap. In order for assessment to not let us down, if I may, when performing in community, then we must create an assessment momentum, if I may, in between. And this stepping stone will allow the latter assessment a stronger, a more solid presence in the learning experience. And most importantly, more than the learning experience, in the performing experience, which is the target of anybody who studies a language. Now, I'm doing this through a visual formula, because I have, those of you that know me know that I specialize in teaching young learners. So although we don't have children with us today, I still believe that showing things is an easier way of explaining than just talking, okay? So I'm giving you a visual formula of how we are supposed to conduct our assessment process. And this is for the benchmarks that you have to certify students for grading them. And of course, the infamous certification that I was talking about earlier. Now, there is one category of interventions that I have labeled as progressive ELT. And this means that the further we go, the more they expand. Let me show you, because we're running, our time is our enemy today, as it mostly always is. See, there is an issue of metacognitive awareness. What is metacognitive awareness? Well, metacognitive awareness is when a human being thinks that, or is aware that he is thinking to come up with something. Because normally we just think, and we don't realize that we're thinking, but when we say, when you order food at a restaurant, you had to think about it, but you're not aware that you're thinking. You just say what you thought. But when in metacognitive awareness, there is the thinking of the thinking, okay? It's the highest level of achievement. Now, can we achieve this with linguistic competence? No, it's flat. Okay, it is very mechanical. Now, if I go to an intermediate metacognitive awareness, then I can start there in a very, like in a progressive way, very little in the linguistic competence. It grows when we are doing the personalization, but because we can do it in the personalization process, then it is stronger in the performance in life, in the performance as a living skill or a goal. Now, a case in point, when we write, see? When we write and we teach linguistic competence in writing, we, in modern education, we use process writing. And obviously those that are not using process writing at this stage in our teaching levels, is wrong. We need to do process writing even for linguistic competence, which is the famous pre-writing, writing, revising, presenting. But the scope, and I threw in a little purple ellipse there so that you can see that the scope grows, because now in personalization, we move from process writing to composition, and the scope is bigger. Now it's not just checking that we have taken into consideration all the elements of writing, but now we are putting together a concept, an idea. We are composing. Is it a descriptive composition? Is it a narrative? Now there are academics involved there. And then, my friends, when we perform, when your learners or you as a student, as a professional using English, it moves just from the mere basics or sophisticated composition into the creation of documents. What do I mean by this? Yes, when you write something with a specific purpose, for even a will, okay, that's a document. Anything that has a purpose in real life is a document, as opposed to a narration, a description, which is a composition, okay? Coming from the correct use of the language, which is process writing. So I'm going to get to some examples if time permits, but let me just keep presenting my case. In the intermediate, there are another category. There's another category of language learning where that we have been missing, because if we do not do this intermediate stage, it just won't happen. And you're going to notice that, for instance, the empathy with the topic of study. There is nothing more horrible than someone speaking of something that they are not familiar with, that they just know by heart or rote. If the purpose of communication has to come from something you have to say, then you need to have to say something, not just repeat, or you know what I'm trying to say here. Therefore, you cannot have empathy with something that is just linguistic. In order for empathy to start, see, it's a blind line. It does not exist. In order to have empathy with a topic of study, the empathy part starts only when we do personalization. So if we do linguistic competence, it will never carry on into real life. So then, see, even from linguistic, it is in personalization when empathy as a process of attachment, of a process of having a purpose, a meaning of what we want to say. And you remember the word meaningful from earlier. So then there are certain activities in language learning, certain purposes of language usage that can only happen if we do personalization. That's the only place where they can start, never in the linguistic process. Another category is the famous scaffolding. And I'm sure that those of you that are students have heard of this concept a lot in the different subjects that you are being taught, because it is a very crucial point because of the fact that maybe you were taught English in school, you didn't come with English. Therefore, the learning of both the language and the way to teach the language in a simultaneous way, that's a big challenge. Okay. Therefore, scaffolding is one of the best instruments that your professors have been able to use with you. So therefore, from language construction, which is linguistic competence, all the way to natural speech of a native speaker or a beautifully learned English user, okay, well, there we also have a dotted line. It is not possible. But if we do an intermediate stopover, this is going to be different from the previous one, because this one can have life in linguistic competence only if we stop in an intermediate stage where we give the students the possibility of constructing a language in a meaningful purpose, but still constructing. This is what we call guided speech. We're not asking the students yet for natural speech, but we are asking them for speech. But it is guided. It is still with scaffolds. I think that in Spanish, we call those puntales, okay? Una enseñanza apuntalada, if you pardon my selection of words in Spanish, because what we are doing is constructing a scenario where the students can communicate, but very heavily controlled by the linguistic forms that we taught them. So now, if we do that stopover, then it is possible. But the dotted line says it isn't possible. So how can we connect and continue? Well, let me move this a little bit forward. There we go. How can I achieve this? Well, let me show you how. We can go, if we get to communication and conversation, through lots and lots of practice. If we start, and this is very important, if when we teach the linguistic, when we support the linguistic competence, we make sure that there is a lot of practice, then the bottom arc is being, the possibility of the bottom arch is being feasible, or we are giving it a potential. It's like when, I don't know if you heard this, and pardon my clumsy examples, but when somebody builds a house, and you're only going to build one story. And I remember from my childhood, this anecdote. My parents asked a builder to build a new house. Okay. And I remember that the constructor asked, do you have any future plans of adding another floor to your house? And my mother said, why do you ask? Right now, we want a one-story home. And the builder said, because depending if you do have plans for a second story, then that will mark the needs of the foundation of your first story house. It could be 20, 30 years later, but if you don't tell us now, later you're not going to be able to put a second floor on this. That's exactly what I mean here. If you want your students to be able to reach natural speech, when you do linguistic competence, you are already engaged in foundations. I think it was a good example after all. You have to do lots of practice. So when they get to the personalization, they can do it with flying colors. Okay, they can construct linguistics appropriately and close to natural, as long as it is done through guided speech. And this is done practice. And what we do in the intermediate stages, we connect it with the life already. We start looking into the natural speech necessities. And then the polishing part of the process, we set students in scenarios where they are going to present things, they are going to discuss, express their opinions, reflect living situations. And that, so some of you might say, wait a minute, what if it's going to be a living situation? What is the difference between a living situation to the left and a personalization, which is a living situation in the middle? Well, first, they are personalizing. In the language-life linkage, they are talking about things closer to them, about what they want, what they like, what they. The last one, the living skills and goals, that has to do the needs of their performance in society. If someone is going to be a professor, well, then the lingo has to reach situations that are not personal. That doesn't have to be with your family, your life, your choices, your music, your everything, your everyday life. It has to do with your profession, your performance in community life. And that needs to be prepared from the get-go. And I like to joke a lot, as you know, so here goes. A lot of construction, okay? So then, of course, we move into, so that those can match. Language construction is done, a lot of practice. Language-life linkage, we connect language-life linkage with language construction and guided speech, so that this presentation and discussion can be done in the closest thing to natural speech. This is our target, my friends. So let's get to it. Time is rolling out. So when to start? Well, the earlier the better. If you are a teacher of English and you have an opportunity to teach young learners, that's your biggest moment of starting point, because the younger, the better. In Mexico, fortunately, it's been decades now that we have English in kindergarten. Now even public kindergartens have it. We used to have it in private schools. When I started teaching, we had it in private kindergartens. And now, with the turn of the century, even many public kindergartens are teaching English, and I know it because I have books for that. Then we have the lower primary, upper primary, junior high school, prepa in high school, and then facultad and regular adults, okay? So the more to the left a human being starts, the better off this person is going to be. Now, what about this linguistic competence and then the personalization thing and then the living? So now I've brought in our previous topic to the general scope. This transparency that I'm going to show you right now is probably the most important one that I will be showing you today. And what I mean by this is that I'm going to form, it took me weeks to develop this, to come up with it, because there is a lot of experimentation involved. Notice the different purples here. Notice that the bottom ones are darker and the upper ones, in this particular case, in kindergarten, are lighter. Well, there's a reason for this, see? Because of something that those of you that know me know that I'm a teacher of English, but I'm also a pedagogo, okay? And the specialty of pedagogos is the development of curriculum. And that's probably one of the reasons why I've been successful as an author, because I have a very solid background of curriculum development, okay? So then in terms of curriculum focus, see, the darker, the less dark, lighter, and the lightest one, we're going to call the dark purple major presence, standard presence, basic presence, and then, of course, a minor presence. So then, here we go. Kindergarten, this means that there is a lot of linguistic competence going on. There is a lesser possibility, yet there is presence of personalization. So we go from standard to basic. But when you are teaching a 3, 4, 5-year-old, there isn't that much focus in terms of the way we designed curriculum. There isn't that much focus on living goals or life skills, because the learner is still in a mental development process. Now, as we move, notice what's happening. Little by little, the intermediate stage is expanding. Okay. Little by little, linguistic competence starts losing grounds. Why? Because we already taught it. So now we have to enrich it, not reteach it, okay? And little by little, the very light presence of living skills starts fading and giving a place to more presence of personalization. So when we hit the end of primaria, age 12, then linguistic competence must start fading out in a way, because in curriculum, allegedly, and boy, do I mean allegedly, primaria, kindergarten and primaria are supposed to be one full visit of the English language, okay? One complete, this is why books for sexto grado already talk of, have you ever visited? See, the highest structures of the English language are presented in sexto, because when you start secundaria, you start a second visit, or should start a second visit to the language. And this is why the SEP programs are challenged by teachers, because they say, why are we teaching primero de secundaria students to do things in English if they don't speak it yet? And the people from the SEP come back to those teachers and say, no. Students should have learned in primaria, because that's when they finish the visit to English. So we know of the spiral curriculum, so it really doesn't happen. But the SEP is very ambitious, and they want the students in secundaria to start personalizing and the living skills in a stronger. So in international curriculum, this dark purple presence starts fading, although we still have it. See? So as you can see, in secundaria, we focus a lot on personalization, but notice what's happening as we move to prepa. the major starts again showing, but not for linguistic competence, but for living skills. See? So as we move on, when we finish Prepa and we move into you, those of you that are students at Universidad de Colima, a good course of, and I hope I'm not putting any professor on the spot here, but a good professor in your school teaching those of you that are 18 to 22 or 23 or what have you, a good professor of a English language oriented class, because I know they teach you a lot of stuff, but if it's still a learn more English class, okay, then it should be overwhelmed with activities and use of the language to prepare you with living skills, because you are about to say goodbye. Here I am, state of Colima, any other place you come from. I am ready to serve. I am ready to be a professional in English, which is different from you being a human being that needs English for being who you are. That's the personalization part. The Universidad de Colima and any other university that you come from should prepare you not just to be yourselves in terms of the person, but you to be capable of performing in English in whichever area, professional area, you have decided to contribute to. And that, my friends, is the challenge. But I see why I told you that this is the most important transparency that I prepared for you today, because it is a visual manifestation of the characteristics of the courses that someone should take studying English, depending on the level that they are studying English. So big compromise when you graduate from university in terms of how you're supposed to perform using English. Now, back to the salt mines, and I know that we have to use our time very wise. So then, now that we looked at that transparency that gives us a scope, a better understanding of my hypotheses and the theory that I'm trying to present, let's get into specific things. For instance, I already talked about categories of activities. Let's look at specific skills. Reading. Reading is ever present. Even in kindergarten, we start doing phonics. Okay? So all the way to a doctor reading in English, a professional diary or a professional journal or whatever, a magazine. So literacy is reading, conversation, discussing what you read, the correct use of grammar, and of course, something very important, the correct or the ability or the promptness to choose the correct vocabulary for every situation. So we have language models in remember that I'm putting these words under linguistic competence. Let's not forget the connection with the upper part of the transparency, okay? So on the linguistic competence side, what do we contribute in terms of reading? What do we need? Well, we need to see language models and we need vocabulary recycling so it becomes part of our knowledge. On the community side, on the life of the graduate, you have to be able, if you're a teacher of English or a speaker of the language, you need to be able to read stories like novels and what have you. You need to be able to tell, to narrate, to speak, to communicate. You need to be able to, from the perspective of a speaker of English, like I have spoken English all my life, and yet I still go to the dictionary because, see, your vocabulary is always growing. Human beings that are not attached to our lives. Let's say an American that lives in Chicago. They don't know that we exist. They don't care that there are people studying or learning English. They live in English. Well, that person is still concerned about improving vocabulary. It's a non-stopping process. We are always enriching our vocabulary. But can we move from recycling vocabulary that was taught to us through language models to be using the language and enriching everyday vocabulary? I think not. We need the intermediate process of transference and accommodation. What is this? Same story from a little while ago. See, transference and accommodation is a mental process through which we incorporate new ways so that they belong to us. Now it's not something that I saw, that I heard. Now it's something that I have, that I use. And then we transfer that into a professional. And I keep using the word professional, but I don't mean that you have to be a lawyer. What I mean is that you are now performing in life. That's what I mean by, in this case, by professional. So remember this chart? Well, let's look at it again for the next purpose. Remember the when to start, linguistic competence, living goals and skills, personalization. So we saw that. And the reason why I'm bringing it back is because we are going to keep now the different columns. See, we're going to keep the, what belongs to each one. So this is the a follow-up to the original tough, full transparency. What of the things that, because I want to turn it into something you can actually walk away with, take something with you when I finish. And that is, okay, I have to develop linguistic competence. Well, what is it that I teach that goes with that? This is when we teach grammar, when we perform or pursue meaning comprehension, when we are looking for fluency, and of course, when we want to get intonation, fluency and intonation, pronunciation come together mostly. And when we teach reading, is there a difference? Yes. It's a different thing to speak and a different thing to be literate in the language. A lot of people are literate in languages that they do not. A lot of people are speakers of languages that they are not literate in. See? Now, so that is the chunk of language activities or pursuances, if I may, that belong to developing in a student a linguistic competence. Many teachers never get out of these, and that's a big mistake. Everything they do has to do with grammar, meaning, read. But personalization, you already saw these earlier because it is the focus. So I presented them alone earlier, remember? Personalize, customize, accommodate. Remember the last one? Yes, you got it. Culturalize, okay? But what about performance? Remember the other use of professional? The professional performance in life, in community? Well, information, this is key. A professional user of English needs to have ways of accessing information, of looking up things, of taking notes, of concluding on things, of consolidating things. Obviously, whatever it is that you do professionally or in life, it should be enriched. It has to grow. You need to know more. You need to be capable of more skills. You see what I'm trying to say here? And of course, you need to be a professional in them, which means in the use of professional that I have today, I hope I'm not mixing you up here, but in today's use of the word professional, I mean outside of your house, out of yourself, but for the purpose of your living. That's why it says living skills, living goals, okay? So then, performance. In other words, if Universidad de Colima or any other institution does not prepare you to perform in English, then there is a gap that needs to be covered. If you are going to be a teacher of English and you go to a place of teaching and you cannot communicate in English for everything that needs to be done in English, then there is a gap. If you are somebody that studies in a Centro de Idiomas and is a lawyer and cannot discuss about law in English, there is a gap. Because we don't just want the lawyer to be able to go to a restaurant and talk in an interview. We want the lawyer to be able to discuss a case in English. That is what I mean by performance. But with children, performance is like when we ask them to act a play, for instance. See? So performance here has two dimensions. The performance as in the arts and the performance as a human being in society. I think that's a nice way of explaining it. So let's take as time. I'm gonna take at least 10 or 15 minutes so that I can actually have an hour. And we're going to go as far as we can. Let's take the first chunk. Let's take look at the 3 to 6 year olds, in other words, the kindergarten students, the gap filling ALT interventions for literacy, as we said earlier. So here we go. Here they are. And there we have it. See, this is a kindergarten page, a lesson. And what we are doing here is the how to say it. Notice the red rectangle on grammar meaning, because this page is to achieve that. Okay, grammar meaning fluency. So where is mom? She's in the. We are repeating questions and answers that follow the same grammatical structures, because it's grammar disguised as conversation, or it's conversation in a grammatical learning context. Now, same thing here. Where is the baby? Blah blah blah. But we move on to, here is the phonics thing, the nurse, nest, nine, lion, So that's the one that doesn't belong, because we're teaching according to the mental stage of the kid. These are 5-year-olds, okay? So you get the idea. And then the writing, and then we have the tracing. All of these activities follow this first category of linguistic competence. But now, my friends, I'm going to move on to how to say it. Remember, how to say it goes with personalization. So we move on to what are you saying? I'm sorry, with the linguistic competence. And so this is still, although we are reading, because this is the example I'm following, we're still in how to say it. But now I want to move to personalization. And now it is what to say that represents a growth. And to show you an example, this is, remember I told you that I do experimentation. So this is Cindy's work. I asked the kids to draw a house, to draw their house, okay? Now, why is Cindy's house so flat, so square, and there is nothing, there's no shed, there is no garden, there is nothing? Because I want you to see the list: personalize, customize, accommodate. See, because of the limitations, we have to bring it short, okay? So then, let me show you this. See, for instance, for the first category, personalize, with a big smile, okay, draw your house. To customize, draw your 4 favorite rooms of your house. So now Cindy knew that she wasn't going to draw her house, but rather 4 rooms of her house, if it went up to that. What about for accommodate? To attach it so that they can know it. Accommodation comes from the Gestalt, from the Piaget principle of accommodation. So then accommodate. What rooms are they? Can you name them? See, now it's getting personal. What do you do in the kitchen? And you're going to get different answers. There are students that say that they eat in the kitchen because they don't use the dining room. There are students that say they're going to cook because they do use a dining room of sorts. Okay. Now, when I asked, what do you do in the bedroom? Well, the kids it was a very very risque question, but fortunately, because of the age of the students, everybody said that they slept there or they took naps, that kind of stuff. What do you put in the closet? And of course, everybody said clothes. And do you have stairs? And it was a yes or a no. Bottom line, I am accommodating. So now it's become personal, but in order to get the best of it, I have to culturalize it. And there's where I'm going to give you an example of the theoretical thing that I told you earlier. It is very important that we always land any concept we say. Otherwise, it's going to be just false theory or very loose theory, if not false. And it might be of your interest, but it doesn't take you anywhere. Okay. So I am accustomed to land things. So let me land the culturalizing thing. If I already asked them, what do you do in the kitchen? Then what is left? What is the the culturalization, my friends, is when it really hits the student as he or she lives her life. This question would have different answers in different cultures. Do you eat in your kitchen or in the dining room? What do you like to eat? Who cooks? And you should see the answers in Paris. as opposed to the answers in Guatemala. What do you drink with your food? And that's another problem. See, in cities like my city, I'm originally from Nuevo León. I live in the United States, but I'm a very proud Mexican from Monterrey. Okay, and if you ask someone in Monterrey, what do you eat with your food? It's always going to be Coca-Cola. Okay, but I've noticed in many South American countries that a lot of people say that they eat with juices. Okay, I don't think you can catch a Regio dead having lunch with orange juice as the accompanying liquid. But in Ecuador, in Colombia, you see people ordering food at a restaurant. They say, "Y me trae un jugo." You're like, what? So my point is that this is what we mean by culturalizing. See, do you have a pet? What is it? What's your pet's name? Does your pet live inside or outside? Which, of course, becomes a big issue of your house. Do you have a closet? What do you have in your closet? So this is what I mean culturalizing. It is very important that when we teach this intermediate stage, and I don't mean that it's going to happen in every day, all stages. No. That's why I showed you those purple rectangles. See, I could be teaching for week's end without getting into personalization yet. So depending on the age of the student. So what I'm trying to say is that when it comes to personalization, we must include a culturalizing activity. And then, of course, let's move it up, the target in community. Because these are very young kids, well, I'm not going to train them into going and opening a restaurant. No, these kids are 3, 4, 5. So then my way of turning it into performance, remember, information, content enrichment, performance, I play a game. I draw, I write the words kitchen, dining room on the floor, or just be sure, if you use paper, be sure you tape it with masking tape or something, so it's not a slippery situation, because the kids are going to stop and jump on top of it. And then they're going to say whatever, oh, what are you doing? They bedroom. And I sleep. See, they're performing. They're jumping around in front of the other people. Because remember what I told you earlier, performance has 2 uses. Performance as in arts and performance as a human being that performs in life. Now, remember the progressive category? Well, how do we take it in reading? Well, we start with phonics and meaning when we're building the linguistic competence, and fluency and intonation. Of all the categories that I talked about, see, they belong to linguistic competence. The ones that are remember seeing that as a category. Now, information, content enrichment. So that is a very huge jump from learning to speak, learning to pronounce, into enriching through conversations. That's very difficult. So then we do CLIL. And those of you that are not in the first semester, okay, have already run into the concept of CLIL many times in the teaching by your professors. And the reason why we started teaching content and language integrated is because we knew that this was coming. We knew that a student was supposed to get involved with reading, still with the scaffolds. Remember my wild example of apuntalar? Well, a way of apuntalar our possibilities from being able to pronounce and understand to using it as a way is to teach content in the middle, but in a guided, controlled way. And that's what CLIL is. CLIL is a way of presenting reading and discussion to students about content, but in an English language learning way, not in a native speaker way. Okay, so then through jumping through CLIL, we can make it happen. This is not a CLIL session, so I can't get any further at this point. But remember this, well, for this example, I'm going to go to reading, and I'm going to take the second chunk, the 6 to 9-year-olds. So let's take them. And of course, this is an example of CLIL. And when you teach CLIL, you teach content words, see? So there's a progressive ELT intervention. So you see that I'm not going to stop and read it because we don't have time, but you can see that we have here are the concepts about jobs. So the students are going to read about jobs and they are going to get into discussing them. So there's going to be some discussion, but we're going to focus first in grammar and meaning comprehension. And then we focus on personalization. How do I personalize? Well, do you like art? Do you have a favorite work of art? You see, from learning about the existence of it, we move into what do you think about it? So that they can have something to say. And this is when we give our students a what to say. We allow them, we give them feedback, we help them out. But then we move into the information part, the performance part. So what other creative jobs can you think of? What talents do you need to do a creative job? So now the students are going to do research. They're going to put together information. They're going to enrich the content, and they are going to talk about it by performing. Okay, so there you have it. Now, another example of remember the scaffolding example, the apuntalamiento example? I'm going to do this tomorrow with people that don't speak Spanish, so I'm going to have a problem explaining it. Remember the extra practice, the language life linkage? Well, let me show you an example of that. When you see a conversation going on, and every single book has it because it's a very strong way of presenting language use, in other words, disguised grammar models. Okay, then we have a conversation, and that's where we have the how to say it. Those conversations always have language models, obviously with correct English, so the student sees models and sees an example of what an example looks like. And then, of course, we move into visualization of the linguistic uses. This is a Gestalt chart. This is a concentration, a global visualization of language use. We practice it so that the students can be able to have fluency. So all this is fun, but it's all grammar meaning, okay? As we move on, then we have the places visited. See, this is extra work. And you can see that we have these students are going to stand up to personalize. Who? What's your name? Pedro. Okay. I'm a friend of Pedro, so that's why I use his name. When? Yesterday. Where did you go? It's not what I wrote in the book. It's a student that's going to come up with a reality thing. That's why we're personalizing. What did you do? What did you see? Did you like it? And of course, if the first part was not completely learned, and it's never going to be, then you're going to get questions. Hey, teacher, how do you say? And that's going to happen a lot. And we want that to happen. And then we move into information. Remember the performance? So now the students, now they're talking about, hey, I would like to go here. Oh, yeah, my grandparents went to Europe and they brought me, teacher, how do you say llavero? And it goes on and on and on. And what you're getting here is a content enrichment. Next time the students will know how to say a keychain, okay? And they will know how to perform as ways of talking into it and the like. Now, let me see what's going on here. Oh, here we go. Okay. Now, so this is a why say it. And of course, we have, this is another example, but I want to use my last 2 minutes to show you a final example before I have to say thank you. And actually, that's the next thing. Basically, what we want to do here is we want to turn from, let me see, where do I have it? Here it is. See, I want you to indulge me if possible. And I want you to, okay, where did I go? And where's my, oh, here it is. Okay, play. Here we go. In writing, what I did, this is remember this example of composition and then of course documents? Well, what I did with my students, and this one was for the upper primary, we read about the ugly duckling. And then we went to the grammar part there, and you know what I mean by, because we already did it. So we answered questions for pre-writing, and so we answer everything because you have to read and then write. And I'm not stopping because I only have 2 minutes. And then of course we move into personalization. And to personalize, I asked them to find a famous fairy tale in their notebook and to rewrite it as a play. So students, in other words, to find what to say. So my students went into what to say in writing. So one of my teams went into the famous the pea on the pod, okay, the one about the princess. And you see that, so they developed into a play, scene one, and so the whole hello and this, I ELTized the famous story about the princess who wanted to marry a prince, but they weren't sure she was a princess, so they put the pea under the mattress. Remember that story? Okay, so we turned it into ELT, and so what I'm showing you now is the different roles that we developed. See, and the pictures are the art we developed to show it as a story. But I want to use I'm going very fast because I want to show you the actual play into animation, because because I'm not with you. I can't ask someone to be the narrator and someone to be the prince, because I'm not there with you. So in lieu of that, I prepared, of course, here's a wedding, the end. In lieu of that, I prepared the whole thing as an ongoing presentation. So my performance, this would be you. Are you ready? Please indulge me 1-2 minutes.
Once upon a time, there was a prince who wanted to marry a princess, but she would have to be a real princess. He traveled all over the world to find one, but he couldn't find one. There were a lot of princesses, but it wasn't easy to find out if they were real ones. There was always something about them that was not right. I'm sad because I can't find a real princess. I better go home. Evening, terrible storm came, and there was thunder and lightning, and the rain poured down heavily. Suddenly, someone knocked at the gate, and the old king went to open it. Hello, my dear. How can I help you? Your Majesty, sorry to bother you. I am Princess Mary from the Kingdom of Pearson, but because of the storm, I can't go back to my palace. May you find it in your heart to let me stay here for the night? Of course, my dear. So, you are a real princess? But look at you. She didn't look well. The water ran down from her hair and clothes. She was all soaked. Come in, my dear. Let's talk to the queen. This young lady says she is the Princess of Pearson and that she needs to stay the night here at the palace. Oh, my lord. Come, my dear, let me see that you get a comfortable bed. We'll soon find out if she is a real princess or not.
Dun, 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 dun.
The queen said nothing more. She went into the bedroom, took all the bedding off the bedstead, and put a pea on the bottom. Then she took 20 mattresses and laid them on the pea, and then laid 20 comforters on top of the mattresses. Your bed is ready, my dear. You may rest now. I'm sure you'll be well in the morning. Good night. Thank you, Your Majesty. I will rest now. Good night. The king, queen, and prince are talking and having breakfast in the dining room. And I put 20 mattresses and 20 comforters on top of the pea, and the princess, still looking tired, enters, interrupting the queen. Everybody greets her. Good morning, dear. Did you have a good rest last night? Oh, Your Majesty, I had a very bad night. I slept very little. Heaven only knows what was in the bed, but I felt something hard, so all my body hurts. It's horrible. Now I know she is a real princess because she felt the pea right through the 20 mattresses and the 20 comforters. Nobody but a real princess could be as sensitive as that. I can't let her go. I will ask her to marry me. They are all at the palace hall saying their goodbyes. The king walks to the gate to call a carriage. The queen stays in the hall while the prince and the princess walk to the gate to wait for the carriage. Princess Mary, I know we just met, but I have been looking for a real princess many years. Will you make me the happiest man in all of the 7 kingdoms? Will you marry me? Oh my God, I will ask my father, but I'm sure he'll say yes. I hope so. Please have a safe trip home. I will be waiting for the good news. One month later, they were all in the kingdom's cathedral, excited with the wedding of the century. The prince and the princess got married. The people from both their kingdoms attended in joy. It was a beautiful wedding. After the ceremony, the royal couple walked to the public square and all the people cheered them. After they returned from their wedding trip, they went looking for the pea that had helped the prince find a real princess to marry. The pea is now at the kingdom's museum, and thousands of subjects go see it every year. They want to see the small, insignificant legume that helped their prince find true love. The end. And there you have it. Okay. So as you can see, let me just see, there we go. As you can see, obviously it's time for me to end, but this is the way, this is the production, the performance of the students. And that is a way of showing them their performance of English in real life, in community. Obviously, when you teach a grown-up, it would look in a different way. So I want to thank you very, very much for having me today. I wish you the best, and I hope that your conference continues with the greatest results ever. And I really look forward to seeing you in the very near future. Thank you so much, and take care. I'll see you around.
Alex, no te escuchas. Alex, no te escuchas.
Ya, perdón, la Universidad de Colima, a través de la Dirección General de Educación Continua, otorga la presente constancia al maestro Mario Herrera por su participación como facilitador en el ciclo internacional de conferencias y talleres con motivo del 37 aniversario de la Facultad de Lenguas Extranjeras de la Universidad de Colima, realizado por la Facultad de Lenguas Extranjeras del 19 al 21 de septiembre de 2022, con duración de 15 horas y valor curricular. Atentamente, Estudia, lucha, trabaja, Colima, México, septiembre del 2022. Y firma el maestro Jesús Omar Brizuela Padilla, director general de la Dirección General de Educación Continua. Muchísimas gracias, Mario Herrera, por su participación, por su presentación.